Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's something that's so insane that you witnessed, but no one believes you because there's no proof? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
An adult bull moose walked into the local grocery in the middle of the day, headed to the produce section, and started eating fruit. Everyone outside my town doesn't believe it, but nobody within the town will ever forget. In my city, we lift our hand at the pedestrian crossing and the cars stop so we can cross. Most people respect it. One day getting off the bus, I saw a dog stop and lift his paw at the crossing. I stopped to watch, believing it was a coincidence. Nope. The car stopped for the dog, and he only crossed when it was completely safe. And yes, the dog was alone. No human beside him lifting their hand or anything. Most people don't believe me to this day. That dog must have been a once-in-a-generation genius, or he was taught by someone before living on the streets. When I was about 6, I was running down the stairs at school, first to leave the classroom at the end of the day. I pulled a 50p coin from my pocket and dropped it. It bounced down the stairs, and when it hit the floor at the bottom, landed perfectly upright on its side. For non-English people, 50 pesos are a huge, thin, 7-sided coin, and this is just so impossibly unlikely to happen. I stood and stared in disbelief and tried to tell everyone that rushed past, but no one seemed to believe me or care. Eventually, I picked it up and went home with no one to share the moment with. One of the most exciting moments of my life. In middle school, walking home from a friend's house, I went to pet a doggy. It looked like a big golden lab facing away from me. I got about 3 feet away and it turned toward me, mountain lion, in the front yard, right near the sidewalk of a Chicago suburban house in an unremarkable neighborhood. I had nightmares for weeks. Finally, there was another sighting next town over, and it made the papers. And then all the stories came out about pets going missing, rabbit heads found in yards, and all the associated madness. My dad still thought I imagined it. I was a small kid and it was a big lion. When I went to visit my grandparents in Florida, I swear I saw a woman who was riding a motorized couch on the sidewalk, like it had wheels, and evidently some kind of engine that allowed it to roll around, and she was controlling it with a joystick. We were driving too fast for me to take any pictures before she was out of view. When I was in middle school at a sleepover, my friend and I were talking about our favorite foods. He said his favorite was meatball marinara, and I said marinara. So we made a bet, it was raining outside, that if lightning struck the place where I pointed within a minute, that I was right. He said that was too long, so we changed it to 10 seconds. As soon as I said 1, it struck exactly in that place. We were so hyped we almost woke up the other people, but no one believed us. This happened to my mom and I, but nobody believes our story. I was at the kitchen table studying when I was 16. My mom was cooking dinner. A fly was buzzing around and she swatted at it with a dishcloth, the same dishcloth that was on her shoulder being used as a hand wiping rag while cooking. While waving the cloth around, she let go of it. It flew somewhere behind her and then it was just gone. Gone. We both overturned the entire kitchen and even pulled out furniture like the fridge, looking for it until we started to feel crazy. Was there ever a rag? Was she just using her hand and not a rag to swat at the fly and we were mistaken? It was so bizarre. Years later, when the house was completely empty because we were moving out, we both went back in and did one final look. No rag. So I guess in some alternate dimension, some gnome was sitting around and a portal opened to dump a wet cooking rag on it, because what other explanation is there?
You know, I think most people have had a phenomenon like this. I mean, in my home, socks disappear like everyone else's. But yeah, I've had things that literally like vanished. So, pretty interesting. And I think that gnome hopefully thanked you for it.
I saw a giant meteor in the sky around 2007 or 2008. It was so big it lit up everything like it was daytime for a split second. It was much bigger than the moon in the sky. It had a slowed down and started stuttering like it had low frame rate, and then disappeared as fast as it appeared. Legit thought that was it for us. Climbing Mount Hood back in 2007 near summit when a drone came buzzing up alongside the mountain and essentially crop dusted the climbing route before going over Summit, made a loop and then flew back down south side of Hood. This was well before DJI consumer drones took off and was clearly a military or experimental drone. I owned a historic house that was built in the 1700s. It had formerly been owned by a well-known politician who used it as a country cottage. My bedroom was directly over the large reception room. On more than one occasion, I woke up to hearing jazz music, people laughing and glasses clinking. It could not have been the neighbors, since I didn't have any. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but it just seems hard to explain it away. Was walking to the shops, and as I came upon the cycle path that ran behind the house, I witnessed a whole family. 2 kids in full school uniforms with blazers, a dad in full business suit and briefcase, and a mother in her own professional business attire, all riding unicycles on their way to start their busy days. Stood there dumbfounded for a second before carrying on. Everyone rubbished my story, but it happened, man. It happened. Internet slap on the back if you can correctly guess the city it happened in. UK. This happened when I was a sophomore in high school. The school day just ended and I was on my way toward the exit near where my bus parked waiting for its riders. This exit was somewhat isolated because you couldn't enter the building through it, and it was on the side of the school where only the band and orchestra rooms were. Anyways, I turned down the hallway toward the exit and I see a couple of students. I presume they were high school seniors or were sitting around at the exit with a garbage can in between them. As I come closer, I notice them both eating bananas. As I get even closer, I see there are banana peels piled in the garbage can above the rim. When I got close enough, they offered me a banana. I was so flabbergasted, all I could do was decline and leave on my way to the bus. I have no idea how they could have eaten so many bananas, or if they just opened up a bunch of peels and threw the bananas away with the peels, or even who those people were. But every day I regret not having asked them questions to come to an understanding of what was going on. About 15 to 20 years ago, I was at a Minnesota Vikings game. As I was walking through the concourse to get a beer, I walked by a little girl that I would have guessed to be about 7 years old. She had 2 heads. I didn't turn around to confirm because I didn't want to be that guy. I got back to my seat and nobody believed me. It was to the point that I was not sure if my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Fast forward about 10 years, and I saw an ad for a reality show about a set of co-joined twins from Minnesota named Abby and Brittany. Turns out I wasn't crazy. I lived high up in a skyscraper at the time, 26th floor. Potentially relevant is that I had just watched a convincing UFO documentary. As the credits rolled, I noticed a large, weird insect on the window, so went over to look at it. It was a cool bug, but just a bug. But beyond it, I then noticed something small falling from the sky, apparently down in a straight line. It tumbled down to eye level and then landed on a nearby patch of grass. I put a leash on the dog, took the elevator down, and walked over to investigate. It was an empty bottle of Febreze air freshener. To this day, I don't know if it fell out of a helicopter or what. It was much higher than any of the neighboring buildings when I noticed it. Maybe an Olympic athlete could have thrown it that far up. Maybe someone launched it with a homemade cannon or something, or maybe it was a message from the aliens that I misunderstood. This is a little different, but 30 years ago, when I was much more agile, I was at my brother's birthday party. It was a pretty big bash, with about 50 people there. I knew most, but not all the guests. The house has an upstairs-downstairs with most of the people downstairs, cement floor. A toddler was going down the steps and fell from halfway up. His head was headed for the cement floor. I was standing 12 feet 4 meters away, and my volleyball instincts kick in. I made a flat-out full-length dive and caught his head in my hands as he somersaulted into my arms. I saved his life, or at best a bad concussion. Again, the room was full of people, all visiting, eating, drinking, and no one saw me. One of the greatest disappointments of my life, LOL. My ex and I were driving around one night, super late, around 2 a.m. We were driving around the empty edge of town where there's a refinery. We were driving along a ridge road that overlooked a bunch of refinery stuff. Suddenly the streetlights went out and the road was like dark. I pulled the car to a stop because we were going quick and suddenly I couldn't see anything. My ex gasped and I said, "Look." The sky flashed bright for a moment, Then everything was dark. The refinery, the sky, cloud cover, everything. Then the whole sky turned green from behind the next hill, which I know for a fact there's nothing over there. A couple abandoned storage tanks and basically unreachable beach at the bottom of a forest. It was bright, like nearing daylight bright, but green. Then it went dark again. Slowly emergency lights came on below. I didn't wait around to see what was going on. We hightailed it back to town. There were fire trucks and police vehicles roving around the edge of the refinery, full lights, but silent. Back in town, the power was also out and the streets were empty, dead empty. Then 3 ambulances, again full lights but silent, were tearing down the other way toward the refinery. Then I noticed a cop about half a block behind me, full lights, no siren. And it followed along the main roads, then stopped at the corner of my residential. Never seen anything like that before or ever again. No one believes me. When I was like 9, I was riding my bike at high speed and had the brilliant idea of ramming my shoe into the fork of my front tire to slow down instead of using my brake. Well, I did it, crammed my foot right in there with reckless abandon. The forward momentum of my bike turned into rotation, and I did a complete front flip at ground level. I was working through my confusion when I noticed a woman on the sidewalk of the opposite side of the road who witnessed it. She looked at me and said, "What the?" and started laughing, so I did too. No one ever believed me. I came out of a pub one winter night in the mid-'80s. I was about 10 meters behind my friend group because I'd struggled to put my jacket on. As I looked to my right, I saw a glowing mauve lilac ball hovering about 50 centimeters off the ground. It moved at about walking speed into a tree and disappeared. It was about the size of a soccer ball, maybe a bit smaller. It seemed to be fizzing and popping, but was completely silent. As far as I could see, it didn't come out of the other side of the tree. I opened my mouth to call out to my friends, but by this time, they were 25 to 30 meters away, and the glowing ball was gone. Not to send this off on a tangent, but when I was 8 years old, living in rural Illinois, I witnessed a UFO UAP hovering over a cornfield about 300 yards away from me as I was headed home for dinner. Sun was just beginning to go down. I can't say how long I watched it before it shot straight up and disappeared, but I caught hell for being late for dinner. When I tried to explain what I'd seen, I was ridiculed and sent to my room without dinner for lying. Never said much about it to anyone until recently. 5-year-old me, early morning noises from downstairs, 2-floor house. I go from my room into my parents' bed as I was shitting myself for the noises. Blanket all the way up above my nose, I hear steps. Someone is coming up the stairs. It looked like a man, but he was all dark. You couldn't see his clothes because he didn't have any. Not naked, just a dark figure with yellow eyes and a black dot as a pupil. He looked at me and went into our spare bedroom. It wasn't a dream because my day carried on, and my dad woke up not long after. I asked him to check the spare bedroom and nothing was there. To this day, I don't know what that was. If someone saw the same, let's talk about it. I breathed underwater once, like I realized it was happening, and did my best to check it was really happening because I knew it shouldn't be. Eventually, I realized I'd been at the bottom of the pool for a long time and surfaced to tell my mother and ask for an explanation. But she was reading a book and thought I was just making up nonsense. So logically, I put my face in the water and tried to do it again. Started crying because now I had stinging water up my nose and apparently failing at understanding reality. Like 20 years later, my older stepson came home and told me about how he'd found himself breathing at the bottom of the pool at the park and only surfaced when he realized he might be worrying the lifeguard. Told him, yeah, I did that once too. Reality isn't as solid as it looks. Just be careful with that, please. He was maybe 17 years old at the time. I was at a Target with my mom and my sister one night. It was maybe an hour or so before closing and there wasn't a lot of customers. I looked up and saw a guy in a pink bunny costume and aviator sunglasses. He waves at me, does a little hop and runs away. Neither of them saw or believed me. A few minutes go by, same thing. Wave, hop, runs away. Again, no one but me sees this. Third time, and they think I'm just effing with them. A little while later, we make our way over to the area where all the Easter stuff is. It was right before Easter, and there are a bunch of these costumes. In front of them are a pair of shoes that presumably belonged to the guy dressed as a bunny. Turns out, it was one of the guys from Home Makeover. They were in town getting ready to do an episode in the area and came in for some stuff for the show. As far as I know, I'm the only witness to these antics. Myself and 3 friends were hiking California in 1997 and saw 2 alien people. I ran off with the 12-year-old child ahead on the trail. My 2 friends caught up with us a few minutes later and said they were just weird Europeans and shrugged it off. When we arrived at the campsite, I spoke to a few other people who saw them on the trail. They were not human. They were 3 feet tall, had blonde hair, white skin. They were on some type of skis that allowed them to hover along. They were naked, but no hair. I'm still in contact with my old friends. The 12-year-old is close to 40 now, and he remembers exactly what I saw, but his mom still swears they were Europeans, and when I ask how they were floating on skis, she says she doesn't remember that. She does remember that they were naked and 3 feet and white with blonde head of hair and no hair anywhere else. About 1 week after my granddad died, I was sleeping in his house where my grandma still lived and got woken up to the sound of my granddad's voice calling my name. I walked out onto the landing at the top of the stairs and it was absolutely freezing cold. Then when I looked down the stairs, the wall at the bottom was all warped and moving weird like jelly. The way I always described it was like the old Windows PC screensaver, when a magnified blob would move across the screen and distort everything, or like the Predator invisible outline effect. The next morning, before I even mentioned anything, my grandma said she had also heard my granddad's voice during the night. Years later, my grandma also died in that house, and my cousin ended up moving into it. She eventually had to move out because she kept hearing the sound of my grandma's smoker's cough and her walking stick clicking up and down the stairs during the night, and it really freaked her out. This was over 20 years ago, and I still think about it often and have a weird urge to go inside the house.